Hello everyone and welcome back to Carvenus 14. Now today we are going to be talking about Shenhe once again. Now if you guys remember, I actually did make a video on cryo DPS Shenhe and explaining the disadvantages of that version of Shenhe, right? So today we're going to be creating another video on, basically I'll be taking you through a couple of reasons why physical DPS Shenhe is also not as amazing as people would think. Now, of course, what I mean to say is it's brilliant, but obviously everything that is brilliant will still have some disadvantages. So we're going to go over those disadvantages today. Now, if you guys want to see a video on Shenhe's advantages, both physical and cryo, I already did make a video on that, and it was literally titled why you should pull for Shenhe. It was titled something like that, right? So yeah, basically the plan today is to go over the disadvantages of physical DPS Shenhe and see why it's not as brilliant as you may think. Now, moving on with the actual beginnings. So today, I mean not today, but any day we're gonna go with Shenhe. Now, if you guys have been following this channel for a while, you would know that I've been maining Shenhe since the beginning of days. Since basically first day ever since she came out, I've been making well, I haven't been consistently making videos, but I've been making videos on all sorts of weird and wacky builds that you can do with Shenhe's physical DPS form. I haven't done much on cryo DPS form, but her physical DPS, I definitely have made a load of videos explaining what sort of sets can work with her, what kind of builds you can do with her, and what weapons are good with her. Well, 4-star weapons mainly. So yeah, so I do have a lot of experience with Shenhe physical DPS, so most likely my word should be worth quite a bit here. So yeah, of course, feel free to do whatever you guys wish to, but I'm just going to be providing the evidence for you as well as the points. So yeah, moving onwards. Now, the first reason and the most obvious reason why physical DPS Shenhe is not brilliant is because Shenhe's elemental skill straight up just doesn't work. Basically, Shenhe's elemental skill only buffs cryo damage, and if you're going to be doing physical DPS Shenhe, then Shenhe's elemental skill is not going to be buffing your damage at all. Now, you still use your elemental skill because it will actually proc the Ascension 4 passive, which increases your normal and charge attack and plunging attack and elemental skill and burst damage by 15%, right, respectively, right? So that's why you still use this. Now, of course, you shouldn't, to be fair, if you don't level up your elemental skill and you play physical DPS Shenhe, honestly, you're not missing out. You really don't need to level up Shenhe's elemental skill at all, to be brutally honest. Yeah, because Shenhe's elemental skill, her entire identity is her elemental skill, and the fact that the elemental skill is not going to be buffing anything just makes it kind of wasted if you are going to be leveling up. Now, I did level it up because I had the spare resources to spend on this elemental skill talent, and I still have a lot more where that came from. So it wasn't really a huge in-game financial matter for me, or resource matter for me. So I'm perfectly fine with spending those resources. So yeah. But if you guys do want to go physical DPS Shenhe, there is really no need for you to go and level up this talent to a very high level. The only reason you'd probably want to level this up is for the raw damage that it gives. And luckily, because Shenhe's elemental skill is so important, she has ridiculously high base scaling on her elemental skill. So even if you go physical DPS Shenhe, her elemental skill will hit very, very hard. I mean, you can tell by the scaling there. So yeah, Shenhe's elemental burst is a little bit more useful, right? Because Shenhe's elemental burst will give you both physical resistance and cryo resistance. So what's it called? Your elemental burst actually does cooperate with your physical damage. However, the resistance shred isn't actually a flat amount. In order to get more resistance shred, you actually have to level up Shenhe's talent level. Yeah. So at level 1, I believe the resistance shred is like 5%, and it goes up by 1% every time you level it up, the maximum being 15%, which is what I have here. So if you do want the maximum resistance shred, then you will have to go all the way to level 10. But to be fair, even if you stop at level 6 would be like 11%, which is 4% less. So to be brutally honest, it really isn't that much of a difference. But I'm just saying that, you know, you don't have to put too many resources into leveling up Shenhe's elemental skill and burst in order to really see any effects. Now, Shenhe's normal attack talents, another drawback here is that, well, as you can clearly see, her scalings aren't really brilliant. They're not awful, they aren't god-awful, but they're not amazing, really. To be fair, they're kind of below average, under par, but that makes sense because she is a support unit. Like, why on earth would you give a support unit broken normal attack scaling stuff? Like, that just wouldn't really make any sense for them, right? Unless they're like a carry support, like a support that is meant to do damage with their normal attacks. In that case, they'll just be a DPS, right? So, yeah, that'd be a very weird character concept, but also a pretty cool one as well. Yeah. So anyway, Shenhe's normal attack scaling is not ridiculously high. It's below average. So you will have to give her quite a decent amount of investment if you want her to do damage, right? Because of how low her multipliers are. However, with the artifact sets and weapons, it's not actually too difficult to come up with stuff like that. That's the good thing about it, right? But in short, on the talents page, two of the major drawbacks is, number one, her normal attack scaling is not brilliant, and her elemental skill is completely useless. So, yeah, there's that. Now, as for constellations, another massive drawback is that Shenhe's constellations, if you do decide to go physical, Shenhe's constellations will not do anything for her. Especially C3 to C6, yeah, they just straight up will not do anything. Now, C1 isn't necessarily a buff to Shenhe, it's more of a nice utility kind of thing. But even if you don't have C1, honestly, you'll just have a 5-second downtime on your ultimate, on your elemental skill, which means you'll have a 5-second downtime of that Ascension 4 passive. But then again, that's still not even too bad, to be brutally honest. Yeah. So you really don't need Shenhe C1, and Shenhe C2 just increases the duration of her ultimate. And Shenhe's ultimate lasts for 12 seconds. If you guys see in the talents page, Shenhe's ultimate lasts for 12 seconds. However, if you do decide to go for C2, it will last for an extra 6 seconds, which means a total length of 18 seconds. Right. The second bit of the entire Constellation is that it increases cryo crit damage, which is completely useless for this build. So, yeah, of course, let's not forget that cryo crit damage and cryo damage together isn't completely useless with physical DPS Shenhe, because if Shenhe can buff her own elemental skill and elemental burst damage, then it's still not a bad shout. But like I said, because you're not prioritizing cryo damage with the build itself, the only form of cryo damage boosting you're going to get that will make your abilities hit harder is going to be coming from Shenhe's passives and stuff like that, basically. So, unfortunately, they're not going to be able to really do too much to Shenhe. Yeah. Shenhe's own personal damage, like on a DPSing scale. So that's why these passives just don't really seem worth it, to be brutally honest. Yeah. Shenhe's Constellation 2 also just increases the duration, effectively, for physical DPS Shenhe. It just increases the duration at which her ultimate lasts for. But here's another problem. Can you reliably keep opponents in the actual circle? Now think about it. The smaller enemies could be easily knocked out of the circle. The bigger enemies, most likely the world bosses and stuff like weekly bosses, opponents like that, they all have some form of dash or teleport or escape or something like that, basically. Yeah. So there's also that. And then there's, of course, most of the mobs in the game, as of right now, have some form of teleport or dash or blink, something like that, basically. Yeah. So, you know, it is what it is. C2 kind of seems like a constellation that is, once again, meh, because it doesn't personally boost Shenhe's physical damage in any way whatsoever. So that's strike number 2. Shenhe's physical DPS suffers from the fact that her own kit cannot make her stronger. Now, that is, as you will be able to tell, quite a bit of a problem, because cryo DPS Shenhe and most DPSs out there, right? Well, obviously, it's not fair to compare Shenhe with an actual dedicated DPS, but what I'm trying to say is that if you are going to go physical DPS Shenhe, don't expect mad damage, right? Compared to other characters. Of course, if you see my DPS showcases on physical DPS Shenhe, right, that is, of course, with many things out of, out of your control. Like, what I mean to say is that, let's not forget that, number one, I have the Staff of Homer, which isn't a weapon that everyone has. Some people got really unlucky on the gacha, right? Some people have gotten really unlucky on the gacha, and some people just don't want to risk going for the Staff of Homer because they're afraid of getting the other weapon, right? Which is Aqua Simulacra as of the last patch. But of course, that patch was a while ago. And then, of course, the Staff of Homer is also I wouldn't say pretty rare, but it was kind of rare, because Hu Tao's only ever had 3 banners, I think. Has she had 3 banners or 3 rerun banners? I think Hu Tao's either had 3 or 4 banners. So yeah, but only 2 of them were really good banners, which was the first one, which came with the Wolf's Gravestone, and then there was the 4th one, which came with the Aqua Simulacra. Those 2 were really the only 2 that people were thinking, okay, this banner's worth it, you know? So yeah. Not everyone would have rolled for these, for the Staff of Homer. In fact, I actually did manage to get lucky enough and grab the Staff of Homer as soon as it came out. Literally, when Hu Tao came out, I grabbed the Staff of Homer then, and I've been using the weapon ever since. In fact, fun fact for you guys, I've actually been using the Staff of Homer ever since the day it came out, because if you guys, I don't know if you guys actually know this, but I was actually originally a Zhongli main. I used to main Zhongli from the very beginning of the game all the way up until Inazuma. Then when Raiden Shogun came out, I mained Raiden Shogun for a little bit, and then Shenhe came out, and I've been using Shenhe as my main DPS. Now, Raiden Shogun DPS, I'm not gonna lie, I don't personally prefer it. I just don't. I preferred Zhongli's playstyle compared to Raiden Shogun's playstyle. Zhongli was just more fun than Raiden Shogun, for my opinion, and I know that might not make sense for most people, but I just preferred Zhongli DPS over Raiden Shogun DPS. So yeah, and then Shenhe came along, and I decided to use that. So I've basically been using polearm characters as my DPS ever since the beginning of the game. So yeah, I've been able to use this weapon all the time, basically. Now, are there any drawbacks for Shenhe's weapons? Not really, because unlike cryo DPS Shenhe, I did actually forget to mention this in the cryo DPS Shenhe video, guys. Another drawback that cryo DPS Shenhe does suffer from is the fact that she doesn't really have any accessible free-to-play weapons. Like, none of the craftable weapons are really brilliant choices on her. I mean, the Crescent Pike is a physical damage weapon. Where is it? Hold on. So I have the Crescent Pike, which is a physical damage weapon, so that wouldn't make any sense. The Prototype Star Glitter also wouldn't make any sense, because it gives you energy recharge as a substat. And of course, there is the passive, which does increase your normal and charge attack after you use an elemental skill, but still, it's not as brilliant as some of the other options. It's really a last resort option you want to go down. Yeah. Then, of course, there's the Inazuma weapon, which is this one. Now, this doesn't really do anything for Shenhe's DPS at all. And then there's the new polearm, which the new Sumeru polearm, which is based around dendro reactions, I'm pretty sure. And obviously, cryo cannot react with dendro, which means that weapon makes 0 sense to put on Shenhe as well. Now, of course, luckily, there were some weapons that came out in events, like the Missive Wind Spear, but of course, the problem with the Missive Wind Spear is that it's an event-exclusive weapon. If you weren't a high enough adventure rank at the time, or you literally only started playing, Genshin Impact like today or a few days ago, you will have missed out on this weapon and the refinement ranks. And this is an event-exclusive weapon, which means you cannot get it again. Basically, once it's gone, it's gone. There's no chance of it coming back. At least as of right now, as of making this video, MiHoYo haven't brought back any of the older event weapons. So yeah, it's pretty unlikely that this weapon is ever going to come back. And that's a shame, because honestly, this weapon is pretty good. Because after you trigger an elemental reaction, right, you can actually utilize this weapon. It will basically increase your attack by 24% and your elemental mastery by 96, provided you have this weapon at R5, which you probably will have if you have done the event. So yeah, it's a pretty good weapon for cryo DPS Shenhe. And then of course there's also the lithic blade, which increases your crit rate as well as your attack based on the number of Liu Wei champions on your team. Now Shenhe already counts as 1, so yeah, you just need another 2. And to be brutally honest, with the lithic spear, these weapons you realistically only need 3. Right, 3 champions, like 3 characters from Liu Wei are enough, and the last one can be your slot. But of course, that is a little bit restricting in terms of the team build. But the build that the team that I suggested in the other video, right, the cryo DPS video, was what is it, like Jingshui, Chongyun, Shenhe, and then Bennett. That's a pretty good, solid team. In fact, it's the best team, I think, for cryo DPS Shenhe. So yeah. Of course, I'm not a cryo DPS Shenhe main, so yeah, I don't really have too much to say on that topic. But as you can see, guys, the lithic spear is another gacha exclusive weapon only, which means it's only available through the actual gacha, right? And of course, with the 4 stars, 5 4-star weapons are usually have a boosted rate, which means you're not even guaranteed the lithic spear, exactly like the 5-star weapons. So it's a little bit risky. So most people just won't have these weapons lying around, and that's why I say cryo DPS Shenhe. It's a lot more difficult to get a weapon for cryo DPS Shenhe. I mean, of course, you do have the Black Cliff pole, but once again, there's another problem with that, because the Black Cliff pole, if it's still around, I believe it is actually. The Black Cliff pole, right, is, well, it's number 1 in the Star Glitter shop, which means it requires Star Glitter, and the only way to get Star Glitter is by wishing on the actual gacha again, and you need to get 4 stars and 5 stars in order to get these, and they're pretty expensive, to be brutally honest, for us free-to-plays that don't wish a lot. So yeah, but provided you do have this weapon, it's a very solid weapon. It gives you crit damage as a substat. However, the problem is that the passive is kind of reliant on if you can kill enemies or not. In a mob fight, it's pretty good. Like in a group fighting situation, it's very good. But in a boss, this passive is just not going to do anything. So it'd just be a stat stick. So yeah, like I said, like coming up with weapons for cryo DPS Shenhe is a little bit difficult unless you already have a gacha related weapon or something. So yeah, that's cryo DPS Shenhe, but that's not the main purpose of this video. The main purpose of this video is physical DPS Shenhe. So sorry for getting sidetracked there. But physical DPS Shenhe, guys, is a lot easier to get weapons for, so that's not really a disadvantage there. You have Crescent Pike, which is literally every single free-to-play player will have. And you might be saying, oh yeah, well, the billets are hard to come across. The billets are only difficult to come across if you are late game. If you're early game, right, billets are pretty easy to come across, right? It's ridiculously easy because the souvenir shops are much easier. You can get currency for the souvenir shops a lot easier at the beginning of the game than at a later point in the game, because you will have exhausted all your resources by late game. So yeah, really, you don't have too much problems with coming up with a weapon for, physical DPS Shenhe. And then, of course, you also have the Dragon Spine Spear, which is a mistake. Don't do it. Just don't do it. I have already made a video on comparing Crescent Pike with Dragon Spine Spear, so if you guys do want to check that out, go ahead. As for the artifact options, though, now, the artifact options, cryo DPS Shenhe and physical DPS Shenhe, luckily, both have very lovely artifact options. Now, cryo DPS Shenhe, there's only really one brilliant option on her, which is the Blizzard Strayer, but I still think it's amazingly worth it to go. I've already made a video on cryo DPS Shenhe's advantages. You can check that one out. Yeah, so with physical DPS Shenhe, the only thing that I can say that is really good for like free-to-play players, right, that don't have a lot of time or patience, is just go 2-piece Bloodstain, 2-piece Pale Flame, because it's the easiest set to farm for, because you can mix and match much easier as well, because you're going for 2 sets instead of a full 4 set. It's much easier to get pieces for, because you can mix and match depending on what substats are better where, so it's a lot easier. This is easily the best build that you can actually go for on Shenhe. So yeah, there's that. Of course, there are also other options, like a full 4-piece Shimenow's Reminiscence. Now, I won't go too much into detail, but all I'm going to say is that the 4-piece passive for this set works really well with Shenhe's Ascension 4 passive. Yeah, I've already made a full video on why Shimenao's Reminiscence is a broken set on Shenhe, and a lot of people with DPSs, like DPS Shenhes, should definitely go this set. To be fair, even Cryo DPS Shenhe can utilize this really, really well. Of course, the only drawback with this set is that you will sacrifice 15 energy, and there's a chance that you may not be using your burst at all when you do use this set. In fact, I hardly ever use Shenhe's burst anymore with this artifact set, but the thing is I'm giving up 15% physical resistance shred for 50% increased normal charge and plunging attack damage, and in my books that is well worth the trade. So yeah, this is why I really like this set. Of course, the drawback being that you can't use your ultimate most of the time, but hey, at least you don't have to worry about energy recharge anymore, so that's also a good thing. Echoes of an Offering is also a good set on Shenhe, but the problem is you kind of need to make the set crit because of the way the set works. I'm not going to go into that in this video because I have already made a video on Echoes of an Offering with Shenhe as well, so do go and check that video out if you guys want to. So yeah, and of course, building artifacts for Shenhe, physical DPS Shenhe, is not too bad either. You can go attack percent. Obviously, attack percent timepiece is going to be brilliant. Then physical damage bonus Goblet is going to be the most difficult piece to actually get, because physical damage is one of the most difficult pieces to get in the game. In fact, I think there's only like a 2% chance for it to drop. It's ridiculously difficult. I got super lucky because I got physical damage bonus with crit rate and crit damage, and they both rolled really well, so I got stupidly lucky with this one. So thank the gods that I got a good piece. And then obviously crit rate or crit damage depending on what you need. So yeah. Then as for anything else, guys, there is really no other disadvantages I can think of, like I said. But yeah, the main disadvantage is the fact that there's Shenhe's normal attack, like scalings are just not amazing. You can't use your elemental skill. I mean, you can, but it just won't be giving you any buffs. So that's what a lot of people actually have a problem with physical DPS Shenhe. Like, physical DPS Shenhe is fun, don't get me wrong, but even on videos where I've actually posted my Shenhe, like submitted it on Discords to review my Shenhe and stuff, people in the comments are saying that, you know, it's a pretty fun build, don't get me wrong, but if you were to go cryo DPS Shenhe, you'd be able to get so much more damage. And I'm thinking, yeah, definitely, they're not wrong. It's just that this is a personal choice that I made, and I really like the way physical DPS Shenhe plays out, and there's so much more flexibility. Speaking of flexibility, we will get onto that point in a bit, but yeah, so attack strings not high scaling, and elemental skill is completely useless here. Elemental burst is also kind of, I mean, to be fair, it does have its uses. So yeah, the elemental burst is really the only thing that kind of has it going for this build. But then again, depending on which set you go, you may not even be using the elemental skill at all. So yeah. Then as for constellations, Shenhe's constellations are just not needed for physical DPS, which could be a good thing for most people, because it means they're not, you know, they don't have a need to get constellations in order for Shenhe to hit higher damage numbers. But it could also be a bad thing for some people, because it means that Shenhe's constellations are kind of useless, meaning that you won't be able to get any more power out from Shenhe herself. And of course, that is one major flaw. Shenhe requires, like, Shenhe's physical damage is going to be coming from solely external influences. So weapons, artifacts, you know, teammates in the actual party. Nowhere in her own kit will she be able to boost her own physical damage. So that's a pretty huge drawback. So yeah, that's effectively it for Shenhe's actual character, guys, for physical damage. Now we're going to look at the actual party setups. Now, luckily, Shenhe, being physical characters are probably the easiest teams to actually build physical for, right? Now, as you can see here, this team is a team that I have actually personally constructed for Shenhe. Now, I do believe I've actually made a video on my team for Shenhe, and I have gone into detail about how to actually how I thought of this team, so I won't go too much into detail. I always say that, but I always end up making videos 40 minutes long, so yeah, but we'll start off with the basics. Now, Lisa. Why did I go with Lisa? Number one, Lisa is Electro. So that means superconduct. If you don't know what superconduct, guys, is basically, superconduct is a reaction between the cryo element and the electro element that basically when it hits an opponent, or when an opponent gets affected by both electro and cryo, superconduct is applied onto them. Now, what it initially does is it does a burst of AoE cryo damage, and then the opponents hit with superconduct have a debuff put on them, and that debuff is that their physical resistance is reduced by 40% of their current value. So basically you're flat out reducing opponents' physical resistance, yeah, by 40%. That's a very, very huge amount. Yeah, and then of course if you have Shenhe's elemental burst up, that's 40 plus 15, so 55% altogether. That's a lot of resistance shred. So yeah, another reason why I chose Lisa is because of the fact that, you know, she's a catalyst character, so she can use Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayers, and if you've been on Genshin Impact long enough, everyone and their mother knows how broken this weapon is. It straight up just gives 48% attack to your next character that switches on. It's a brilliant weapon, so that's why I use it on you know, Lisa. I also put Noblesse Oblige on Lisa so I can get even more attack after she uses her ultimate. And then Lisa also has one of the most broken passive talents in the game, and no one talks about it. Opponents hit by Lightning Rose, which is Lisa's elemental burst, they will have their defense decreased by 15% for 10 seconds. Yeah. Now, 15% decrease in defense straight up just decreases the amount of damage that they can take overall, right? And I'm pretty sure resistances will also be scaled with your defense. So if you're reducing your defense, you're also reducing the resistances to specific elements and stuff, right? Yeah. So you're decreasing the physical attribute, you're decreasing the specific attribute and the general attribute with Lisa. So yeah, my Lisa gives me 2 buffs and 2 debuffs. So yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. But to be fair, all you really need with physical DPS Shenhe is just an electro character. That could be literally anyone. It could honestly be anyone, like any electro character in the game. Where are they? Where's the filter button? Electro. Confirm. Like, literally any electro character in the game. Fischl is also not a bad bet. Raiden Shogun is really good at applying electro. Kujo-Sara can buff your damage as well, but obviously me being on mobile, I'm not a huge fan of Kujo-Sara's playstyle. Beto's also not a bad shout. Kaching is an absolute mistake. I shouldn't say that on YouTube. People are going to get very annoyed. I just don't like Kaching. There's just something about Kaching. I just don't like her. You may attack me in the comment section below, but I will not waver. It's my own opinion. I hate Kaching. So, yeah. You just need an electro character, basically, guys. Who it is, it doesn't really matter, as long as they're not a DPS. But any character that's an electro character will work completely fine. Now, as for the final 2 slots, they're flex slots. Like, you could literally put anyone here. It doesn't have to be double Geo like I've gone with. The only reason I've gone with double Geo is because the Geo passive is basically, it increases shield strength by 15%, which, let's be brutally honest, Zhongli does not need any more shielding power. But what basically happens is when the character on the field is shielded by Zhongli's shield, right, or a shield, so it could be Noel's shield or anything like that, basically. I'm pretty sure this passive also applies to crystallized shields as well. Yeah, so that's what makes it pretty strong. Basically, their damage dealt towards opponents is increased by 15%. What that basically means is the damage that Shenhe will do is increased by 15%. So basically, what it will do, it will take into account the damage that Shenhe is putting out, and then multiply that by 15%, and then add that value on top of the value that Shenhe was doing already. Yeah, so it's pretty ridiculous, and that's honestly why I went for the double Geo. Also, another reason why I went with double Geo is because of what Zhongli can do. Now, obviously, not everyone has access to Zhongli, but what I'm trying to say is Zhongli's Jade Shield. Basically, if you guys didn't know, back in the early days of Genshin Impact, Zhongli, a lot of people were actually not happy with the way that Zhongli was working. right? So what they ended up doing was they ended up buffing the hell out of him. They basically gave him HP scaling so that his attacks dealt more damage based off his HP, right? And they made his shield tankier, number 1. They gave him increased resistances when activating his shield, number 2. His pillar would also come straight down when you activated the shield, right? So number 3, even more utility, you wouldn't have to choose. And number 4, they gave Zhongli's shield a resistance shredding ability. Yeah. So if Zhongli's shield was up and there were opponents nearby, those opponents would have their elemental and physical resistance reduced by 20%. Yeah. That's effectively a mini version of both Viridescent Veneer and Superconduct. Viridescent Veneer, if you didn't know, reduces elemental resistances based on the element swirled, effectively, by 40%. Yeah, so this is effectively a mini version of Viridescent Veneer and Superconduct together. So, all in all, with Lisa as well, I'll have 40% through Superconduct, 15% through Shenhe's Burst, and then, you know, another 20% through Zhongli. So altogether, that's like 75% physical resistance shred. Yeah. That's a lot. Also, obviously, if you aren't using Shenhe's Elemental Burst, that's still 60%, which is still really, really good. So that's the main reason why I decided to go with Zhongli in my team, because he just provides such good utility. I didn't even build him for the shield, honestly. The shield is more of like a cherry on top. The main reason I went for him was because of that physical resistance shred, because that's how, you know, strong it really is. And besides, because it's a percentage value, the more physical resistance that an opponent has, the more the resistance shred is going to do. So, yeah, it's really good into squishy targets, and it's really good into tankier targets as well. And then as for what Yoon Jin is doing here, Yoon Jin is kind of here because, number 1, she buffs normal attack damage. That's her main identity. Her elemental skill, or her elemental burst, actually buffs, you know, normal attack damage. And at level 11, I do have a Constellation for her C3. At level 11, its damage increase, your normal attack damage increase, is 61% of Yoon Jin's defense. And my Yoon Jin's defense is fairly high. It's like 2,363. And let's not forget, guys, that Yoon Jin doesn't exactly have a best-in-slot weapon in this game, because there isn't an actual defense main stat polearm. The closest that you can get is the deathmatch, and that gives you defense percent based on the number of opponents near you. If it's 2 or more, it gives you defense percent. If it's just 1, it doesn't give you anything at all. So you won't even get this buff during boss fights. And the deathmatch is also a battle pass weapon, so you need to buy it, essentially. Yeah. So, you know, Yoon Jin's defense is actually, my Yoon Jin's defense is fairly high, but of course, getting defense on Yoon Jin isn't too bad. She's not too difficult to build, because Husk of Opulent Dreams, you just need defense, defense, defense. Like, that's literally what I did. Defense, defense, defense. That's literally what I did. So, yeah. She's not too bad to build. Now, as for any other things you could do, you could probably go someone like Bennett, right? Like, you could go Bennett and Jin Yan, because Jin Yan actually boosts your entire party's physical damage bonus when you're surrounded by the shield. When you have Jin Yan's shield on you, you get 15% physical damage bonus increase. So, yeah, you could go something like that, or you could go, like, anyone else, basically. Someone like Kaya, or basically anyone else. You could effectively go, there's loads of characters you can actually go, right? If you wanted to, you could go double cryo, double electro for a lot of battery charging potential and stuff like that.
Oh,
so,
well, would be nice.
Yeah. You can even go with a team like this, to be honest. Like, physical resistance shred, physical damage bonus, and even more physical resistance shred. So, yeah. You could honestly just do a team like that. Basically, what I'm trying to say, guys, is Shenhe has a decent amount of physical teams that you can actually go. Now, before we want to end off, obviously, these were good points on Shenhe. Physical DPS Shenhe, this video is about the bad points. And unfortunately, I am going to have to hit the nail on everyone's heads here. And the truth is that with the way that the game is going, physical damage is dying. it's just dying. Physical damage is dying off. Now, of course, Mika is coming out, and he can definitely revamp the entire physical damage, you know, community, right? With Mika coming out, he'd be brilliant for physical DPS Shenhe, any physical damage unit in the game, but most importantly, Eula, right? So effectively, with Mika's release, there's a chance that physical damage can actually come back, right? But of course, if miHoYo don't want to do anything after Mika with physical damage, physical damage may as well be killed off because of how bad, or not bad, but I'm sorry, bad is the wrong word to use here, because of how underpowered it is compared to all sorts of other elements. Like, especially with Sumeru's release, everyone is talking about the Dendro reactions and stuff like that, and they're not wrong. The Dendro reactions are really good. Burgeon is amazing. Aggravate just boosts your damage even more, and then there's you know, there's the Bloom reaction as well, which just gives you a lot of AoE nuclear bombs effectively. So yeah, like reactions like pirate, like what is it called, elemental damage types is just better because unlike physical damage bonus, elemental damage can make use of reactions. Physical damage can't. The only reaction it can really use is superconduct, and that's it. Yeah, and it's a bit of a shame because physical damage bonus, I feel as though, is not very, you know, powerful compared to, I mean, of course Eula exists, but Eula doesn't represent physical damage, you know what I mean? She just already has really good scaling effectively. The reason why she's so strong is because of her really stupidly high scaling on her normal attack talents. In fact, I'm pretty sure she has the highest normal attack talent scaling in the game, but she kind of has to because she's a physical damage dealer. The only reason she's so strong is because of her physical damage, because of her physical damage identity. She needs to have that because she can't use reactions. And unlike Eula, who's a dedicated physical DPS, Shenhe is not a dedicated physical DPS. She doesn't have the ridiculous scalings that Eula has, or anyone else like a physical damage dealer has, like Razor and stuff like that, right? She wasn't built for physical damage, so you need external influences in order to help Shenhe do crazy damage, right? And that's why I'm able to hit such high numbers, because you guys can see, when I pop everything on my DPS showcases, like all the ultimates available, right, I do pretty amazing damage. But that's only if I use all the bursts at the exact same time. Let's be brutally honest, right? In most case scenarios, you won't really be getting everyone's burst out on the field at the exact same time, will you? Yeah, I mean, maybe you can. But in most case scenarios, you probably won't be able to. So, unfortunately, physical DPS Shenhe is slowly but surely going to be getting weaker and weaker and weaker if miHoYo, or Hoyoverse I should say, doesn't come up with a plan to revive it somehow, right? Like, they need to give physical damage more powers, like a new physical damage polearm, or a new weapon that comes out, like a new weapon that comes out, right, with physical damage bonus, right, as well as crit rate and crit damage. Of course, that'd be very, very busted. But what I'm trying to say is they could do something like that in order to help, not even a weapon, maybe just another artifact set that boosts physical damage, because the only two we have is Bloodstained Chivalry and Pale Flame. Like, Bloodstained Chivalry can't be used universally, unless, like, the only character I can actually think of that can use Bloodstained Chivalry, the full 4-piece, is maybe a charged attack physical Kaching. But that's, like, once again, that's very, very specific, right? And then for Pale Flame, the only characters I can think of that use it, well, to be fair, DPS Zhongli can use it really well. DPS Fischl as well, physical DPS Fischl, of course Eula, characters like that. But like I said, we need a physical set that can be utilized by, you know, universally. Yeah, but I think if Hoyoverse do that, it might move the game's identity to physical damage rather than elemental. But anyway, this isn't really a discussion video. All I'm trying to say is, guys, is that physical DPS Shenhe is going to suffer if physical damage doesn't get the love and attention that it needs in order to grow, because Shenhe is very reliant on external influences in order to get her damage increase, right? In order to get stronger, Shenhe needs better weapons, better artifacts. She's very reliant on external influences. And that's why physical DPS Shenhe is one of, if not, one of the most reliant things on external influences in the game, because she can't buff her own damage. Of course, you can say this exact same thing for any other support champion that doesn't really, you know, have any form of physical buffing in their kit. And you're right. You definitely are right. But even for those types of champions, the point still stands. Because they're so reliant on external influences like teammates, weapons, artifacts, things that they just can't do themselves, right? It's vital that they get some form of attention, because physical DPS Shenhe is going to carry on getting weaker and weaker and weaker as the game's meta moves towards elemental damage. Now, for us casuals, that's not really going to stop us. We're going to play physical DPS Shenhe, and I'm still going to play physical DPS Shenhe because I just love the way that physical DPS Shenhe works. It's much more flexible than cryo DPS Shenhe. You're not restricted to a circle. Unlike cryo DPS Shenhe, you're not restricted to that circle, right? And yeah, your damage may be lower, but it's more fun because, you know, you just don't have that restriction or that, you know, lack of flexibility basically that you have with the team building, with with the actual cryo field being placed down in specific locations and enemies moving around all over the place, keeping it hard to track. So yeah. This is why I like physical DPS Shenhe, and this is why I would definitely say that physical DPS Shenhe is very fun. But like I said, guys, the points I listed off, right, we will go over a final check. So number one, Shenhe's elemental skill will do absolutely nothing to buff her damage, and that's the main drawback from this, because her entire identity is her elemental skill. That's point number one. Number two, her normal attack talent scalings is not very high. It's below average. So that's point number two. Point number three, Shenhe's constellations do absolutely nothing for her in terms of damage potential. So point number four. And finally, point number three. And point number four, physical damage in the game is not in a really good position right now. When Mika comes out, that's definitely going to change, because Mika will be able to increase physical damage and physical damage crit, physical bonus crit damage as well. Yeah, so once Mika comes out, that could change. But if the way that the game is going right now, more into elemental reactions and stuff like that, physical damage as a whole may just be killed off, meaning physical DPS Shenhe may not even be a fun casual build anymore. So yeah. But anyway, guys, I've dragged out the video for long enough now. I have been Carvenus14 and Salam, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you all very, very soon. Goodbye.